I promise to pay when I grow up. The words floated across the quiet store like a stone dropped into still water. Conversations faltered. The hum of the overhead lights seemed louder, and even the sliding glass doors at the entrance hesitated in their motion. Daniel Whitmore, once crowned the Phantom Millionaire for his uncanny ability to keep out of the spotlight despite owning half a dozen tech firms, looked up from the row of imported olive oils. His eyes found the source of the voice. A girl no older than 8 stood by the refrigerated milk section. She clutched a baby wrapped in a fraying towel, her small frame bent against the weight. The cold December air had followed her in, trailing frost across her tangled hair and stained t-shirt. The baby whimpered, a thin, hungry sound that didn't belong in a place filled with warm bread and holiday chocolates. The cashier spotted her and scowled. "Hey, this isn't a shelter. Out!" The girl flinched but didn't argue. She adjusted her grip on the baby and began to turn away, her head bowed, her voice small but steady. "I just need milk. I'll pay you back when I grow up." Daniel stepped forward before she could take another step. "She's not stealing," he said evenly, his voice carrying enough authority to make the cashier freeze mid-motion. The man behind the counter blinked. "Mr. Whitmore, look at her. She doesn't—" "I'll be the judge of that," Daniel cut in. The other customers were already watching. Somewhere near the magazine rack, a woman whispered, "That's the kid who sleeps under the old railway bridge." Daniel crouched to meet the girl's eyes. "What's your name?" "Emma," she murmured. "And this is Noah." "He's 1. You came here in this cold?" She nodded. "We ran out of milk yesterday. Mama, she yells a lot. I didn't want her to follow me." Daniel's gaze softened, but his mind was already in motion. Calculating, deciding. "Do you have a coat?" Emma shook her head. "Blanket's all we have that's warm." He stood, grabbed a gallon of whole milk from the shelf, and began piling other items into a basket. Formula, bread, canned soup, diapers, socks. Customers stared. Daniel ignored them. At the checkout, Emma reached up with trembling hands to place the milk on the counter as if it were treasure. "Thank you," she whispered. "I mean it. I'll pay you back when I grow up." Daniel held her gaze. "I believe you." Outside, the wind bit at their faces. He handed her the milk and asked quietly, "Where are you staying?" She hesitated, then said, "Under the bridge. Behind the pipe. It's dry there." Daniel's jaw tightened. This wasn't a random encounter anymore. This was a line he'd just crossed. And deep down, he knew, whatever came next, walking away was no longer an option. The following morning, the city's winter air clung to Daniel's lungs as he stepped out of his black SUV. He wasn't dressed like a man worth millions, just dark jeans, a plain sweater, and a coat thick enough to pass for any commuters. But his eyes, sharp and searching, gave him away. The bridge at Franklin and Westbrook looked the same as it must have last night. Graffiti etched into concrete, the sound of traffic pounding above like distant drums. But Daniel's gaze was drawn to the far left corner, where a heap of blankets and a torn plastic tarp broke the monotony of gray. Emma was there, curled up on a flattened cardboard box, Noah tucked against her chest. Her eyes fluttered open when his footsteps echoed too close. For a second, she stiffened, ready to run. Then she recognized him. "You came back," she said, her voice hoarse. "I told you I would." Noah stirred in her arms, his tiny fingers still tangled in the edge of Daniel's coat, the same one he draped around her last night. "I brought you something," Daniel said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a thermos and handed it to her. "Hot cocoa, not too sweet." Emma twisted the lid carefully, inhaling the steam before taking a sip. Her shoulders dropped, the tension leaking out with each swallow. "Tastes like Christmas," she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. That was the idea. A rustle from behind the tarp made him turn. A woman emerged slowly, using the wall for balance. Her hair was tangled, her eyes clouded but alert. Emma's mother. "You again," she said, her voice low and guarded. "I brought them breakfast," Daniel replied, setting a paper bag on the ground. Inside were egg sandwiches, baby wipes, and 2 folded blankets. The woman eyed the bag, then him. "You from the city? CPS? Number just me." She gave a short, skeptical laugh. "Rich men don't show up under bridges for no reason." Daniel didn't flinch. Neither do mothers and children. Her eyes narrowed. You don't know where I belong. No, he said gently, but I know you deserve better than this. He looked at Emma, then back to her mother. They both do. Silence stretched between them. The rumble of traffic overhead filled the gaps. Finally, she said, blankets don't fix anything. They don't, Daniel agreed, but they help, and so does a locked door, a warm bed, a shower. I can get you a motel room for a week. No strings. She hesitated, suspicion still etched in every line of her face. But when she glanced at Noah's pale cheeks, something shifted. 1 week, she said quietly. That's all. Daniel didn't smile. He just nodded. 1 week. They gathered what little they owned. A grocery bag of clothes, a stuffed rabbit missing one ear, a cracked baby bottle. The walk to the motel was quiet, broken only by the crunch of frost beneath their feet. Inside, the heater wheezed like it hadn't been used in years, but the room was warm. Emma stood in the middle, still holding Noah, turning slowly as if afraid the walls might disappear. It's warm, she whispered. Daniel placed a small duffel on the dresser. Towels, soap, diapers. The front desk won't ask questions. Her mother nodded once, not in thanks, but in acknowledgement. Trust was still a long road away, but Daniel wasn't here for quick wins. He was here because walking away would haunt him far longer than staying ever could. The heater's low hum was the only sound in the room. Emma sat cross-legged on the bed, gently rocking Noah, who was finally asleep. Daniel leaned against the wall near the door, watching the steam curl from the styrofoam cups of cocoa he'd brought from the lobby. I'll check back tomorrow, he said. You'll have privacy here. No one will bother you. Her mother, Sophie, sat on the edge of the other bed, her back straight, her hands folded like she was bracing for a verdict. Do you do this often? No, Daniel replied honestly. This is new for me. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing as though she was searching for the price tag on his kindness. You don't look like the bleeding heart type. I'm not, he said, but sometimes the right thing has nothing to do with what you usually are. Her gaze didn't soften, but she didn't push him out either. Emma climbed down from the bed, fishing something from her pocket. She held it out to him, a crumpled napkin. I drew this for you, she said shyly. Daniel unfolded it. In faint pencil lines, she had sketched 3 figures, a tall man holding hands with a girl and a baby. Above them, in crooked letters, was one word, home. His throat tightened. You're quite the artist. I draw when I get scared, Emma said. It helps. He folded the napkin carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. Then keep drawing. By the time he left, the winter air outside felt sharper. He drove home to his penthouse, a fortress of glass and steel high above the city. The lights blinked on automatically, bathing the sleek furniture in a warm glow. But the space felt hollow, more so after leaving the cramped motel room that had somehow felt fuller. He poured himself a drink, then didn't touch it. Instead, he pulled out Emma's napkin and stared at it under the soft kitchen light. A child's drawing, barely shaded, yet it carried more weight than most contracts he'd signed. Somewhere, under a sagging motel roof, 2 children were warm for the first time in weeks. And Daniel knew this couldn't end in 7 days. The next morning, he returned to the motel with a paper bag of fresh pastries and a small wool coat for Emma. But when he reached room 214, the door was ajar. Inside, the beds were made, the toiletries untouched, the blankets folded neatly. They were gone. He checked the bathroom, the closet, empty. At the front desk, the clerk shrugged. The lady came down early, left the key, said they couldn't stay. Daniel's stomach sank. He spent the rest of the day circling the neighborhood, shelters, soup kitchens, parks. No sign of them. That night, he returned to the bridge. Their corner was bare, the bedding gone, just cold concrete and shadows. He sat on the curb, rain soaking through his shoes, and unfolded the napkin, drawing again. The pencil lines were smudged from damp, but the word home still stood clear. He whispered into the empty street, Wherever you are, I'm not done. And in that moment, under the hum of the freeway, Daniel made a quiet vow, not just to find them, but to give them more than a week of safety. because the look in Emma's eyes when she said home wasn't something you walked away from. By noon the next day, Daniel had visited 3 shelters. The third, an aging red brick community center with a fading mural of smiling children, finally gave him something. "I saw a girl with a baby yesterday," the woman at the intake desk said, frowning in thought. "Small coat, too thin for the cold. Big eyes. She was with a woman, early 30s, dark hair, looked anxious." "That's them," Daniel said. "Did they say where they were headed?" "No," the woman replied, "but the girl mentioned something about food banks near Wilshire." It wasn't much, but it was a direction. By late afternoon, Daniel was weaving through Koreatown, peering into alleyways and bus stops. At a corner store, a corkboard near the door caught his eye. Among faded flyers and business cards was a note. "Found children's jacket, blue with stars, Wilshire and Hoover. Call if yours." His pulse kicked. He called the number. The woman on the other end said she'd seen them 2 nights ago, outside a laundromat next to a taco stand. The little girl dropped the jacket when they left. I think they were headed toward MacArthur Park. Daniel was there within 20 minutes. The sun was sinking, throwing a burnished amber light across the water. The park was mostly empty, save for a few people feeding pigeons. He scanned the benches, the playground, the far hedges, until he heard it. Not crying, singing, a soft hum, barely audible over the street noise. He followed the sound and found her, Emma, curled behind a low hedge, rocking Noah gently in her lap. "Emma," he called softly. She froze. Then, recognizing him, her face lit up in a small, disbelieving smile. "Mr. Whitmore, you found us." She looked thinner, her lips cracked from the cold. Still, she clutched Noah like the world could try and failed to take him from her. "Where's your mom?" Daniel asked. "She went looking for medicine for Noah," Emma said. "Told me to wait here. That was this morning." Daniel's jaw tightened. "How long have you been alone?" Emma shrugged. "A while." He glanced around. The wind had picked up. The temperature was already dropping. "You're not staying here tonight," he said firmly. "But Mama, we'll leave her a note. She'd want you somewhere warm." She hesitated, then nodded. Daniel lifted Noah into his arms. The baby was lighter than he should have been, his skin too cool. Emma trailed beside him, her small hand gripping his coat. This time, he didn't take them to a motel. The elevator to his penthouse opened with a quiet chime. Emma stepped out slowly, eyes wide at the floor-to-ceiling windows and the gleaming hardwood floors. Noah stirred in Daniel's arms. "This is where you live?" she asked. "For now," Daniel said. "It's where you'll live too." Her voice dropped. "I've never had my own bed." "Then it's about time," he replied. As Daniel settled Noah on the couch with a blanket, Emma stood in the middle of the room, still holding her small grocery bag of possessions. She didn't cry, didn't smile, just took a deep breath, as if trying to believe that warmth could last. And in that moment, Daniel knew. This was no longer just about helping a stranger. It was about keeping a promise. That night, Daniel barely slept. He sat in the armchair by the window, city lights glittering far below, listening to the soft hum of the heater and the faint rustle from the guest room where Emma and Noah finally lay warm, safe, and fed. But one person was still missing, Sophie. He pictured her face at the bridge, wary, proud, tired beyond her years. She hadn't meant to abandon her children. Daniel could feel that in his bones. But she was out there somewhere, maybe lost, maybe sick, maybe worse. At 3 a.m., he made a call. "Mike, it's Whitmore," he said when the line picked up. On the other end, a groggy voice muttered, "This better be important." "It is. I need to find a woman. Early 30s, thin, dark hair. Name's Sophie. Last seen near MacArthur Park." Mike Sandler had been a detective before running a private investigations firm. He didn't waste time with small talk. "You think she's in trouble?" "I think she's been in trouble for years," Daniel said. "Bill me whatever it takes." By sunrise, Daniel was in the kitchen brewing coffee when Emma patted in, hair mussed from sleep, wearing a t-shirt that hung to her knees. "Morning," she said, voice still rough. "Morning. Toast?" She nodded, climbing onto one of the tall stools. Mama says if someone gives you a roof, you give them a reason not to regret it. Daniel smiled faintly. Then I guess breakfast is a start. They ate quietly until he asked, "Do you remember where your mom went yesterday?" Emma's small fingers toyed with the crust of her toast. She said the pharmacy on Wilshire, but sometimes she gets stuck. Stuck? She gets scared, can't breathe right. Then she rued Daniel's chest ached. We'll find her, I promise. Later that morning, Mike called. Possible match. She was spotted near a closed clinic on Temple Street, asking for baby aspirin. By the time responders arrived, she was gone. My guess? She'll head somewhere that feels safe. Old haunts, Daniel thought for a moment. The alley behind the old Korean church on Wilshire. Emma said she liked the choir music there. An hour later, Mike's voice came through again. Found her, sitting against the church wall, crying, holding a broken baby bottle. We convinced her to come to my wife's clinic. Daniel was there within 30 minutes. Sophie looked smaller than he remembered, wrapped in a donated blanket, shoes off to the side. When she saw him, her eyes widened. Where's Emma? She's safe, with Noah, at my place. Her shoulders sagged. Then almost in a whisper, I didn't think you'd still be looking. I promised her I would. She looked down at her hands. Why? Why do you care? Daniel sat beside her. Because I can. Because you deserve more than survival. Her voice trembled. What if I mess this up? You will, Daniel said without hesitation. She blinked, startled. We all do, but you'll get another shot, and I'm willing to stand beside you while you take it. For the first time, Sophie didn't argue. She just nodded. And for the second time in 2 days, Daniel Whitmore carried part of the broken world home. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the polished warmth of Daniel's penthouse. Sophie stepped inside as if crossing a border she wasn't sure she was allowed to enter. Her new clothes, clean, donated from the clinic, hung loosely on her frame, but her guarded eyes hadn't changed. Emma spotted her first. Mama! The little girl bolted from the hallway, bare feet pattering against the hardwood. Sophie dropped her bag and sank to her knees as Emma crashed into her arms. They clung to each other, a wordless nod of relief and apology. I was so scared, Emma whispered. I'm here now, Sophie murmured, stroking her daughter's hair. I didn't mean to go. My mind got loud. Daniel stood by the kitchen island, giving them space. Something inside his chest tightened. It had been years since he'd seen that kind of embrace. Pure, desperate, uncalculated. When Noah stirred from his nap, Sophie hurried to scoop him up. She cradled him against her chest, closing her eyes as if memorizing the weight of him. He's heavier, she said softly. Means he's been eating, Daniel replied. Twice a day, sometimes more if Emma talks me into it. Emma grinned. He likes mashed bananas. Daniel smiled faintly. We even got him a bouncer chair. Sophie's eyes wandered around the room now, noticing the gleaming surfaces, the tall windows, the quiet. She still looked out of place, but the weight of her children in her arms kept her anchored. Lunch is ready, Daniel said, gesturing to the table. It wasn't fancy. Grilled cheese, tomato soup, apple slices, but it was warm. Emma slid into a chair with a grin. We haven't sat at a real table since Grandma's house, Sophie said quietly. Daniel poured water into glasses. Then let's change that. They ate mostly in silence, the good kind, the kind that felt like healing. Halfway through, Sophie looked up. It won't be forever, right? No, Daniel said. Just until you're ready. I want to earn it, she said. I don't want to be a charity case. I understand. I've already started looking into transitional housing. Private, safe, with support services. Sophie nodded slowly. That would help. After lunch, Emma convinced Daniel to help her build a pillow fort in the living room. Soon, blankets and cushions transformed the space into a soft-walled kingdom. Inside, Emma curled up beside Noah, who kicked his legs happily. From the armchair, Sophie watched them with a faint smile. Daniel brought her a mug of chamomile tea. I forgot how quiet a real home can be, she said. Quiet can be good, he replied. She studied him. You've lost someone. My wife, he said simply. 10 years ago. Cancer. I kept this place exactly the same since she died. Like if I didn't change it, she wouldn't feel gone. Sop. They sat for a moment, sipping tea. Why us? She asked suddenly. You could have walked away after buying milk for Emma. Daniel looked at her steadily. Because the world keeps telling me money fixes everything. It doesn't. But showing up does. Listening does. Sharing a table, a room, a moment. That still matters. And maybe I needed that reminder as much as you needed the help. For a moment, Sophie didn't look away. She didn't thank him either. But Daniel could tell. Something in her was beginning to trust. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Daniel had just finished a conference call in his home office when Emma's voice echoed faintly from the hallway. She wasn't laughing this time. Her tone was clipped, uncertain. Mama, there's someone at the door. Daniel stepped into the living room and saw Sophie standing by the entryway. Noah in her arms, Emma half hidden behind her legs. The intercom screen glowed, showing a grainy image of a man in a heavy parka and a baseball cap pulled low. Sophie's face had gone pale. It's him, she whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. Who? She swallowed hard. Darnell. The name landed like a weight. Sophie shifted Noah to her other hip and backed a step away from the door. Daniel pressed the intercom button. This is private property. Leave. A rough voice crackled through the speaker. Tell Sophie I just want to talk. Ain't here to cause trouble. Sophie shook her head quickly, eyes wide. That's a lie. He'll want money. Or worse. Daniel didn't open the door. Instead, he reached for his phone. Mike, front entrance. Now within minutes, the private security team stationed in the lobby had escorted Darnell outside. But the tension in Sophie's shoulders didn't ease. He found me before, she said. Doesn't matter where I go, he always finds me. Daniel poured her a glass of water, setting it on the table between them. How long have you known him? Too long, she said bitterly. We met when I was 19. He was charming, loud, made me feel like I mattered. But it changed. First it was yelling, then the hitting, then taking everything I had, my money, my ID, even my shoes once. I left, but... She glanced at Emma. He said he'd never let me go. Daniel leaned forward. You're not alone now. He doesn't get to come near you or the kids again. Her voice cracked. You can't watch us forever. Maybe not, he admitted, but I can make sure the right people do. That evening, Daniel called his lawyer. They discussed restraining orders, safe addresses, even relocation programs. But Daniel knew pieces of paper didn't stop men like Darnell. What stopped them was power, and right now Sophie had none. 2 nights later, the phone in the guest room rang. Emma answered before Daniel could get there. She held it out. It's for Mama. Sophie took it, her face already tense. After a moment of silence, she pressed the receiver to her chest. It's him. He says he knows where the kids' school will be if we ever leave. Daniel took the phone, his voice like ice. You call here again, you'll regret it. There was a laugh on the other end, low, mocking. Big talk, rich man. Money can't keep you warm if you're dead. Then the line went dead. Daniel hung up slowly. He could feel Sophie's eyes on him, fear flickering like a candle about to go out. He didn't make promises this time. Instead, he said quietly, we're going to end this. Not hide from it. And for the first time, Sophie looked at him, not just as the man who'd saved her from the cold, but as someone who might be willing to face her nightmares head on. The next morning, Daniel didn't go to the office. Instead, he stood at the kitchen counter, scrolling through a set of documents Mike had sent overnight. Each page was another piece of Darnell's history, arrest records, assault complaints, unpaid debts, and a trail of eviction notices. But one detail made Daniel's stomach knot. A warrant for questioning in connection with an assault 2 months ago. The victim had been hospitalized. The charges had gone away after she stopped cooperating. He didn't need Mike to tell him why. Sophie emerged from the guest room, Noah balanced on her hip, Emma trailing behind. Her eyes flicked to the papers on the counter. That about sums him up, she said quietly. Daniel slid the pages into a folder. It also means he's not untouchable. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Men like him don't care about courts. He's got friends who hide him, feed him, lie for him. He'll disappear the second he smells trouble. Daniel leaned forward. Then we make sure he doesn't have time to run. By noon, Mike had arranged a meeting with a contact in the LAPD, Detective Alvarez, a woman with a reputation for never letting cases involving vulnerable victims die quietly. They met at Daniel's penthouse, Alvarez's eyes sharp as she listened to Sophie recount everything. Every threat, every time Darnell had taken money, every time she'd been too scared to call the police. Alvarez didn't sugarcoat it. If we move, we have to do it fast. He's slippery, and if he senses pressure, he'll vanish. Sophie glanced at Daniel. You think this will actually stop him? Daniel's voice was steady. I think it's the only chance you've got. That night, they put the plan in motion. Mike's team tracked Darnell's movements, noting every location he visited. 2 nights later, they caught him at a backroom poker game in East LA. The police moved in, finding enough illegal substances and unregistered weapons to hold him without bail, at least for now. When the news reached Sophie, she sat at the dining table in silence for a long moment. He's been in jail before, she finally said. It never sticks. Daniel poured her a cup of coffee. Then we make sure it does this time. For the first time in days, she met his gaze without flinching. You really think you can outlast him? I don't have to outlast him, Daniel said. I just have to make sure his world gets smaller than yours. Over the next week, the tension in the penthouse shifted. Emma laughed more freely, building elaborate forts for Noah, who had started toddling between the couch and the coffee table. Sophie began cooking, simple meals at first, then dishes from her childhood, filling the air with scents that felt like memory. But the shadow hadn't vanished completely. Some nights, Daniel caught Sophie staring out the window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. You're safe here, he'd remind her. She'd nod, but the doubt in her eyes remained, because she knew, as did Daniel, that safety was never just about where you lived. It was about who was willing to stand in the doorway when danger came back. And Daniel Whitmore had already decided, if that day came, he'd be the one standing there. 3 weeks passed before the phone rang again. It was Detective Alvarez. We've got him, she said without preamble. Full list of charges, illegal possession, assault, and now witness intimidation. And Sophie's statement sealed the case. Daniel glanced toward the kitchen, where Sophie was helping Emma with her homework. Noah gumming on a piece of banana in his high chair. Will it stick this time? Alvarez's voice carried no hesitation. It will. He's not getting out. When Daniel relayed the news, Sophie froze, pen still in hand. So, it's over? It's over, he said. She didn't cheer, didn't smile, just let out a long, shaky breath and pressed her palm to her forehead. I've been waiting years to hear that. Emma looked up from her workbook. Does that mean Mama can sleep now? Sophie's eyes shimmered. Yeah, baby, I think it does. That night, the penthouse felt lighter. Sophie cooked her mother's chicken stew recipe, humming softly as she moved between the stove and the counter. Daniel set the table, his chest warming at the sound of Emma's giggles and Noah's delighted squeals. When they sat down, Sophie lifted her spoon but didn't take a bite right away. You know, she said quietly, when I met you under that bridge, I didn't believe a word you said. I thought you'd help for a night, maybe 2. Then you'd vanish, just like everyone else. Daniel looked at her steadily. Then I'm glad I proved you wrong. She smiled faintly, the kind that comes from a place deeper than politeness. You did more than that. You gave me my kids back. After dinner, Emma begged for one last pillow fort before bed. They built it in the living room, stringing fairy lights across the top. Sophie lay inside with both children tucked against her, their breathing slow and even. Daniel stood in the doorway, the glow of the lights casting a warm halo over them. You could stay, you know, Emma murmured sleepily. Sophie laughed softly. I think he's already stayed longer than he planned. But when she glanced up at Daniel, her smile faltered into something more serious. I still don't know why you did all this. Daniel stepped closer. Because I could. Because I should. And because sometimes life gives you a chance to be the person you wish someone had been for you. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she whispered, Thank you. For the first time since he'd found her, there was no suspicion in her voice, only trust. Over the next days, arrangements for Sophie's transitional housing were finalized. It was a small 2-bedroom apartment in a secure building, with a community center downstairs and a playground Emma could see from her window. On move-in day, Daniel helped carry boxes. Emma darted from room to room, declaring each corner perfect, while Sophie stood in the kitchen, her fingers tracing the countertop like she couldn't believe it was real. When he left, Sophie walked him to the door. "You've done enough," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "I'm just getting started." And as he stepped into the hall, he realized the truth. Helping Sophie and her children hadn't just changed their lives. It had changed his too. The day Sophie and her children moved into their new apartment, the city seemed to breathe with them. The late afternoon sun poured through the wide windows, casting golden stripes across the living room floor. Emma chased Noah around the small sofa, both of them laughing so hard they forgot how much their lives had changed in the past few months. Sophie stood by the window, arms crossed, not in defense anymore, but in quiet pride. Daniel watched her from the doorway. There was no fear in her eyes now, only the cautious hope of someone who finally believed tomorrow might be worth planning for. "You're going to do fine here," Daniel said. She glanced at him. "I'm not doing this alone. I have people now. That's the difference." He nodded. People are the difference. They walked together through the apartment one last time. Emma's small bedroom painted in pale yellow, Noah's crib in the corner of Sophie's room, the kitchen stocked with fresh groceries. Sophie ran her fingers along the dining table he had bought, her voice low. "It's not about the walls, it's about what happens inside them." Daniel smiled. "That's home." Before he left, Emma ran up and pressed something into his hand. It was the same napkin drawing she'd given him that first week. 3 figures holding hands with the word home scrawled above them. Only now there was a 4th figure. "That's you," she said, pointing to the tallest one. "Because you don't walk away." Daniel felt a tightness in his throat. "I'll keep it safe." In the hallway, Sophie touched his arm. "You know, you didn't just help us survive. You reminded me that people can show up without wanting something in return. I'll teach my kids that." "That's all I wanted," he said. When the door closed behind him, Daniel stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled laughter from inside. It struck him then. The real victory wasn't that Darnell was gone or that Sophie had an apartment. It was that they'd built something fragile yet unbreakable. Trust, saved. The story wasn't about a millionaire saving a struggling family. It was about the truth that kindness, when given without conditions, can rewrite someone's future. And in doing so, it rewrites yours too. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give isn't money or shelter or even safety. It's the proof that someone believes you are worth saving. And when you give that proof, the world changes. Not all at once, but one home, one family, one quiet promise at a time. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that hope can start in the smallest of gestures, I invite you to stay with us. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep following for more stories that will make you believe in the resilience of the human spirit. Because there are more lives waiting to be changed, and more stories, real, raw, and unforgettable, waiting to be told. And you might just be part of the next one.